Welcome to the Alex Elliott Podcast. My name is Alex Elliott, and on this show, I interview friends of mine and people I know to hear about their fascinating life stories. And now, on to the show. All right, today on the podcast, we have my good friend Jared Geist. Jared is a lawyer, judge, entrepreneur, former Eagle Scout, Cub Scout leader. Anything else you want to add in there?
Uh, I think you covered it pretty good.
Cool.
Former judge, but that's
Former
okay.
judge.
So
Okay.
I won't argue. But
Well, good stories either way. So much like myself, your "Where Are You From" story has a lot of hops. Do you want to walk us through kind of like where were you born? Where did you grow up? How did you end up here?
sure, sure. So a lot of people, even close to me, probably don't know I was actually born in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Hmm.
That's where I was born. I grew up in Michigan, in a town, Brighton, Michigan, where I definitely grew up. Both of my parents are from New Jersey, though. So my mom is from Bogota, New Jersey, in Bergen County, and my dad is from Mahwah, New Jersey, and both grew up in Bergen County, and large families. So a lot of my extended families all originated out here. They've ended
Hmm.
up all over the country, but my dad was one of nine, and my mom was one of five.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I have 22 first
Only?
cousins. Only, yes. When you start counting all their kids and everything else, it just keeps expanding. But
Hmm.
22 first cousins,
Okay.
and really it was my dad was, one of the odd ones out that moved to Detroit to get a job in the automotive industry,
Hmm.
which is why I grew up in Michigan,
Okay.
because he took a job in Detroit. But my parents actually met each other in Indiana at college,
Oh nice. Okay.
at Valparaiso, Indiana.
Hmm.
So after college, they stayed in Indiana for a little while after college. I was born in Indianapolis, and then eventually settled in Michigan, and I grew up in Michigan.
Got it. Okay.
I moved to New Jersey in 2008, um, 2008, 2009, in that range.
Hmm.
It was I
Long time
first
ago. I got.
I came out here for like a summer internship type thing in 2008, and then I settled in permanently in 2009, and
Nice.
that
Okay.
never came back since.
Right. Right.
So.
Okay. So do you feel more New Jersey? Do you feel more Michigan or Indianapolis? Where's it? Where's your heart live? I guess.
Never Indianapolis. I was
Okay.
just a baby. So pretty torn between, answering that question with Michigan and New Jersey.
Hmm.
I live in New Jersey. My family's in New Jersey. I'm from Michigan though, so I always have my Michigan pride. I'll always be a Detroit sports fan. For all the major sports, the
Hmm.
Red Wings, the Tigers, the Pistons, the Lions. So I'm always, when I'm in New Jersey, it's like I feel like I'm from Michigan, and when I go home to Michigan, I'm like, well, I'm from Jersey, but I'll always be a Detroit sports fan. We'll put it that way.
Right, right, okay. Uh,
So,
what um, what did you want when you were growing up? What did you want to do? Like kids always have sort of a dream thing that they want to do.
I wanted to be, as a dream as a kid, I wanted to be the president.
Nice. Okay.
I was always involved. I was always interested in political things, politics,
Hmm.
and as I got a little bit older, but young, very young still, I wanted to be a newspaper editor, a
Mm.
journalist. I was very into reading the newspaper from an early age. So, when I'm talking like 10 years old,
Hmm.
I wanted to be like a newspaper writer or a politician, teetering between those two things.
Mm. Nice. Okay. And then, did you have what did you like about reading newspaper? Was it sort of the politics, history, or politics just in general?
News and opinions. I would always read the editorials back when they, had the daily papers and,
Hmm.
and letters to the editor. I started writing those from a young
Oh
age,
wow. Okay.
but reading them, and so I was very into the editorial pages and opinions, and also local news.
Mm.
Um, this is back in Michigan at the time, but even as I got older and came out here, I mean, it was local news, national news, and editorial and opinion
Do
pages.
Do you remember the topic of one of your early editorials that you sent to the newspaper?
I think one of the first ones I wrote in was a development that was coming in near where I grew up. We lived on a lake that was a pretty private setting, and a development was coming in, and that's a part of life that we're all going through still to
Hmm.
these days. But there were some specifics about you know leaving it a mess and not cleaning it up, and
Mm.
at the time I was like they're littering, so there
Right.
was
Right.
a
Okay.
so it was about basically kind of steamrolling in without talking to the local residents, and
Sure. Sure.
my mom would be all worked up about it, and then I would try to go dig around to get the facts. And my mom would always argue and air her grievances about things, and then I would try to channel that in to be productive and say, well, we could write a letter to the editor about this.
And how old are you around this time?
Uh, that was probably seventh, eighth grade
Okay,
when I
so still
wrote
pretty
the
young. Okay.
like my first letter that they printed was I was at middle school.
Nice.
So,
Okay.
and word got out around town of like, oh,
Your
Jared's causing
activism.
trouble. He's writing letters to the paper. So,
Was that the power of the pen, right? It's very, very
yes,
important early on. Yes,
yeah.
nice. So where you're also one of four brothers. What was it like growing up with four
Yes,
brothers?
yes. I'm the oldest. I have three younger brothers, and so being the older brother was kind of like the trailblazer, I guess.
Hmm.
There was a gap between us. So, well, I'm 43 now, but there's a 2 year gap between my next brother, and then there's like a 10-year gap, and then the two of them are close in age.
Mm.
So. I was in third and fourth grade, respectively, when the younger two were
Right.
born.
Okay.
So I
Oh
remember
wow. Okay.
that
Yeah.
pretty well too. My son's in fourth grade now,
Right. Right.
so
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
so I can, there is a gap there. I think my mom wanted a girl, and I know she wanted a girl, and had two boys, and then after a decade decided to try again and had two more boys, and then gave up. So
I always
after
joke
four boys,
people that have like three girls and they're like, we're gonna try for a boy. Like that's how you end up with four of anything. You're like,
yeah.
let's just keep trying. And like, oh, too far. Nice. So
And all three of them are in
yeah.
Chicago now. So
All
I'm
right.
the,
Okay.
our extended family has gone everywhere. My dad is still in Brighton where I grew up.
Mm.
My mom unfortunately passed away last
Sorry to hear that.
almost a year ago. So that was a sad thing that happened pretty quickly. But my dad's still in Michigan where I grew up, and we go every 4th of July
Mm.
out there to see him. And all three of my brothers are in Chicago. So
Nice. Okay. Do you have a favorite memory of your mother?
of my mother, I
Yeah.
have so many.
Yeah.
I'd have to. Yeah, you know what? Yes, the favorite memory I have with her is actually more recent in life, like 2019,
Hmm.
2018 or 2019. I believe it was in that range right before COVID, when I was sworn into the Supreme Court bar.
Mm.
So it's actually a professional
Yeah. Yeah.
type
We'll
thing
we'll
too.
get to that. I have a lot
Yes,
of questions about that as well.
and to be a part of the bar, you get sworn in, and I actually got sworn in by Chief Justice Roberts as
Oh wow.
in a group of it wasn't just me. There was like 40 of us at the time,
Hmm.
but we got sworn in there, and my you got one guest, and so my one guest was my mom, and
Oh.
we had a great weekend of just like exploring DC, and
Hmm.
I've always loved DC. It's my favorite city for sure. And it was one of those things where we got to bond, like me as an adult,
Hmm.
with her. And it was very rare that we had the weekend of like just the two of us.
Sure. Yeah.
We had plenty of family trips and family things, but I couldn't think of one where it was just the two of us for like a weekend. And so that was really cool.
Right. Well, especially having four kids and
Yeah,
grandkids, the whole
yeah,
nine yards, the big
plenty
family.
of
Yeah.
time together. But when I really thought of like when it was like that was a weekend trip with just the two of us. We got a nice hotel room. My mom was always famous for penny pinching and being wise with every penny and
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
thrifty. And she splurged on that weekend of like, let's get the best
That's great.
hotel.
Yeah.
Let's get the steak
It's,
dinners.
it's not
Let's
often you get sworn into the
yeah,
Supreme Court bar.
yeah.
So
So it was a different side of like it was like a once in a lifetime type thing, and
mm,
so it was a cool experience because it was I saw a different side of my mom,
sure.
and we just had fun the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, that's great. Favorite part of DC? Is there a museum or one of the
I like
monuments
all
that you
the
go?
monuments. I mean, I like just the simple stuff. I like going to the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument and
Hmm.
just doing all the touristy stuff, but on my own, like taking my son there and just walking
Sure.
around. I'll park my car somewhere and just walk for miles to check everything out. So
It is all. I've never walked it. I've only bus toured it or driven. It is all surprisingly very close
yeah,
to
yeah, it's not
everything is
bad.
very walkable, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
it
not.
is. It is. And it's not that hard to figure out. So you can see you can see. I'd like to think it's easier to figure out than New York, but it's I guess it's all if you've been there enough, you know where things are
You
at.
get the lay of
So,
the land. Yeah.
but one thing usually leads to another. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you could go on a couple mile walk and see 10 things
Mm.
that are cool to see. So
When
especially if you like history and
yeah.
government and that kind of thing. So
I did a summer program at Georgetown, and we had a kind of a bus tour, and one of the sort of the tour guides were, I think, current Georgetown students, and if you look carefully at a picture of the Washington Monument, there's like a lighter spot, sort of like three-quarters of the way up, and the guy goes, "Every time we bring tourists from out of town, I say that's how high the flood gets," and they all go, "Really?" And he goes, "No, no, no." So, you grew up in Michigan. Where'd you go to college?
So I went to undergrad at Central Michigan,
Okay.
in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, which is about 2 hours from where I grew up. And then I went to law school at Michigan State
Hmm.
University in East Lansing.
And what'd you study for undergrad?
So I had a double major, journalism and political science.
Okay.
And it,
Carrying the activism from the newspaper?
yeah, and I was the editor of the college paper.
Okay.
I was a writer for my first couple years, and then I was an assistant editor. I was the editor in chief of my high school paper, and
Hmm.
then in college I was an assistant editor of the college paper.
Got it. Okay. And what
Um,
are I've never been involved with newspaper. I mean, I was a yearbook, but never newspaper thing. What are some of the challenges of editing a newspaper in college? I've dealt with college students as well, so I know they can be a little
yeah,
wild. So I'm curious
yeah.
what the journalistic side is like.
I mean, I'm sure it's changed astronomically from then till now. And I mean, it's funny just looking back. I graduated in '05,
Hmm.
so I was in college from '01 to '05, and it feels funny saying it, but I'm like, that's more than 20 years ago. So when you look at it, I mean, like the old school Apple monitors that were like this big, that was like
Hmm.
the new technology we had. You know, there was obviously there was internet, but there wasn't really podcast much of any of that. And I remember the website was just first launching when we were
Hmm.
there of being like a real news website,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's a completely different world now than it was back then. I mean, back then we were worried about print deadlines. We
Hmm.
printed our college paper 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday,
Okay.
Friday, and then you had a
You got
print
to get it to
copy,
the
and it
machine
looked
and
like a
things.
real
Yeah.
newspaper and everything. So there's always these print deadlines that it's a totally different world now with that, like I said. But you know, the biggest challenges were getting accurate quotes and information from people,
Hmm.
and making sure everything that printed was legit.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, making sure it wasn't like rumors, and
Are you
people.
saying college students maybe not the most reliable source?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, but it was fun. It was like it depended on what the story was at the time. It wasn't really a paper about politics or political stuff,
Hmm.
although that came up,
Sure.
especially with like student government elections,
Hmm.
and conflict of interest. And I actually ended up my junior year, I ended up having to resign from the paper because I was running for student government, and
Mm.
so it was that kind of play of being uh, a conflict of interest to
Sure.
work for the paper, even not to cover myself, but even for the bias of the paper covering the student
Sure.
government
Sure. Sure.
elections. So
Yeah.
you learned about all the ethical stuff early on. So I learned a lot from it.
Hmm.
It was like more of like a real paper, like a huge jump from
Yeah.
from the high school
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love journalism. I loved all of it, and I really it's funny because you were asking earlier, what I wanted to do and
Hmm.
everything. And when I was real young, it was always newspaper or political things, and it's still to some extent I enjoy both of those things. But I didn't really decide I wanted to be a lawyer until about my junior year of undergrad.
Okay.
It was never something that was really on my radar.
Hmm.
And the sad reality of it that I learned in the college newspaper industry, as everyone is trying to get jobs and everything at that point,
Mm.
was I didn't think the money was going to be enough to support a lifestyle that I wanted
Sure.
with having a
Yeah.
family and everything
Hmm.
else. And I had to start getting creative of, at the time, if you were great and you were the editor and you got that great job that a couple people each year were
Hmm.
graduating were going to get, it was like 40,000 a year, maybe
Mm.
45,000 a
Yep.
year. And I'm like, I can't live the life I want on that salary. I'm gonna have to figure something else out. And I really didn't have that honest conversation with myself until my junior year
Hmm.
of undergrad. And I also wasn't really ready to be done with school yet. I was like, oh, I'm graduating next
Hmm.
year. To be honest, with myself, I was like, I'm not ready. So I had to come up with a plan. And after a few nights of coming up with a plan, I'm like, oh, well, law school solves both problems. I can eventually make more money.
Right.
I can
Right.
have 3 more years of school. And
Hmm.
if I go to the right law school, I was on a
Sure.
college campus
Yeah.
setting
Yeah.
still. So it kind of extended 3 more years of college to get ready for the real world.
Mm.
And it helped with political stuff that a lot of politicians are
Sure.
lawyers.
I think it's the
So
number one job in Congress, right? Is
yeah,
like former
yeah.
attorney or lawyer kind of
But I honestly never had that plan. It just kind of
thing.
came to in my junior
In
year
your
of
late night,
undergrad.
fever
Yeah.
dream
So I
thing.
started looking
Yeah.
at LSATs and everything else,
Mm.
and it came together. But it was not journalism was the plan
Right. Right. Okay.
until I realized I'm couldn't sign on for that kind of salary and be comfortable with it,
Mm.
honestly.
What
So
what were the other options in this sort of like late night planning session?
none of them really came to fruition. I mean, I was looking at different political things right from the jump.
Hmm.
And then I really was like, I didn't want to like think I was giving up on writing, but I told myself I could always write later on, but it would be
Hmm.
harder to go to law school later on.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I guess I was looking at some political science grad schools, but not seriously. Like it
Hmm.
was kind of like, well, what is that gonna,
Sure. Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what would it do for me? Maybe be a professor or something.
Hmm.
But law school was the only one that really made sense when I started really evaluating it. So.
Nice. Okay. And then how did you pick Michigan State? Was it closer or other factors? The
Yeah, so both. I mean, I ended up I took the LSAT, and I think my score was 158. I don't know. I think they might have changed the grading now. I
yeah.
haven't really looked it up. It's funny. 180 was like perfect back then.
Okay.
I was at 158, which was good, but
Hmm.
not like, like it wouldn't be like a 1600 on the
Sure,
SATs, but
sure,
it was
sure.
pretty good.
Okay.
And so I applied for 4 or 5 law schools, and Michigan State gave me a partial scholarship.
Mm,
It wasn't a full one, but it was a partial one, and it was the best of the schools that gave me something.
got it. Okay.
And they kind of wined and dined me a little bit. They gave me a laptop, and like it's like, oh, you get the laptop, you get this.
Is that allowed under law school recruiting rules?
Yeah. So it was fun, and then Michigan was my number one
Mm,
actually,
okay.
but they waitlisted me,
Mm.
and then they ended up accepting me after I signed on to Michigan State.
Ah,
It's
okay.
one of those classic
Yeah,
stories of
yeah, yeah.
that, but without a financial package or anything,
Sure.
where Michigan
Okay.
State gave me a little money. I still had to take out loans to make it all work, and lived there for 3 years
Mm,
of the law school,
right. Okay.
but it was good because it was I was on a college campus. I actually
Hmm.
at the end of it, I got to overlap at the beginning of my younger brother. One of my younger
Oh,
brothers went to
nice.
Michigan
Yeah,
State,
yeah. That's super nice.
so I overlapped a little of the end of my law school with the beginning of
Hmm.
his freshman year, I believe it was. So, and so that's cool a little bit, and having some friends there and in the area.
Hmm.
It was only an hour from where I went to undergrad, so it was kind of like while I was an undergrad, I visited Michigan State's
Mm.
campus too. So it all made sense.
What do you miss most about that part of the country? Is sort of that time frame.
Just that that part of the country just open, less people.
Hmm.
Honestly, the people are friendlier. And I don't mean
What are you
that
trying to
people.
say? No.
I don't mean that people aren't friendly here, but it's kind of like I become. Maybe friendly is not the right word. Everything's a lot more fast-paced here,
Sure.
for
Yeah.
better and for worse.
Hmm.
And so, like, I become a different person in the sense of being out here for a while, of not having 10-minute conversations when I go to coffee because I'm always in a rush.
Hmm.
Where back there, it's like everyone, it's put the brakes on a little bit,
Sure.
So, just like going to get the coffee, it's like you know the person at the store. Less
Hmm.
people live in the town.
Right.
It's
Right. Right.
more, I don't want to say country, but it's like it's a little slower paced,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
so I miss that. I do, but I also don't miss that.
More
So
opportunities, lots more to do here everywhere,
yeah,
right? So it's
but
a
like just there are I always have to be careful. It's not like good to generalize on that, but
no, sure.
you'll see if you go out there for a week, you see a difference of
Hmm.
just longer conversations with strangers in elevators that
Hmm.
probably would happen here, but it's not the norm here,
Yep.
versus being the norm there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all that kind of thing. And it's a double-edged sword because
Hmm.
like I see myself now becoming like I'm always on the go, I'm always in a run. I get back there, I'm like, oh, like sometimes I have to be like, oh yeah, I'm
Dial
back
it
in
down a
Michigan. It's a
little.
little yeah. So
Yeah. One of my for various reasons, I've spent a lot of time in the Midwest, and one of my favorite stories is I was pulling out of a gas station, and here in New Jersey, if it's a busy road, you have to kind of sort of like edge your way out and kind of like, oh, I'm going. Like you don't even look because if they see that you look, they know you're not gonna go out.
yeah,
And somebody called me, and so I turned my blinker off, and I was chatting on the phone, and I started hearing honking, and I was like, well, who is honking? And I realized somebody was trying to let me in and I wasn't going, so they started honking at me. I was like, this would never happen in New Jersey. It's just very,
no,
very different culture kind of thing. So yeah,
yeah.
it's what and what other things are kind of different between the I also have some other things I'm curious to hear too,
So
like
I
your
mean,
thought.
to the like for example, where I grew up, you could drive for 20 miles and be in the same town,
Mm.
and here you drive 20 miles and you're in 20 towns.
Yes,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, the county I grew up in area-wise, Livingston County in Michigan,
Hmm.
is probably about the same area-wise as Bergen County is. Obviously, the population is exponentially
Mm.
denser here.
Hmm.
Um, but Bergen County has 72 towns or something like that.
I
So,
don't know
you
actually.
know,
Yeah, it's
70
cool.
something. And the town I grew up in probably had like 7 or 8. So, or the
Mm,
county.
sure.
So it's, just that alone because it's less densely populated. Things are spread out.
Hmm.
So you could drive and drive and drive and be in the same town. And so like when people are coming in from out of town and like looking for a hotel, they're like, well, you didn't tell me that was a half hour away. It was in your same town, you know. But things are more
Hmm.
spread out like
Yep.
that. I guess it's just one difference I noticed right away when I
Hmm.
came out here. I kind of freaked out about
Everything's right next to each other, kind
like how.
of.
What do you mean I went through 3 different towns? I
Yeah.
just drove a mile, So,
It's
um,
it's it's funny you mentioned that. A buddy of mine is from Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, which I guess is in western Wisconsin. And I remember I flew into one of the airports, maybe Milwaukee, and we drove, and I didn't see anything, not even another car for like 20 minutes. And question number one was like, Brendan, what happens if your car breaks down here? Like, are you just dead? He's like, oh, you have stuff in the car. You're just like, days gonna. And then we get to where his parents lived, and if I were to blindfold you and drop you off there, you would think you were in Wyckoff. So it was like a development where all the houses were right next to each other, and then
uh-huh.
outside the development was like farm fields as far as the eye could see. And I always wondered, do people decide, you know what? I want to live far away from everybody, but close to like 100 of my neighbors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is pretty funny.
Yeah.
Because like where I live, it's like I don't want to give the wrong impression. It was not like, and it changed a lot from when I was young
Hmm.
to when I was in high school. It actually got very developed. Like when I grew up, it was dirt roads, and
Mm.
when I was in high school, it was paved roads, in
Okay.
my neighborhood. But I don't want to give the impression that we were in the middle of nowhere because we weren't. And
Mm.
now the town's actually become quite like the more popular town in the area. Where when I was young, it wasn't. So
Mm.
that also happened just with the growth of and the time. It definitely got more developed, but it's also, there things are spread out, but
Hmm.
you're not in the middle of nowhere either,
Sure.
to your
Yeah, yeah,
point. So
yeah.
like my high school class had 500 kids.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, but like I said, it would be if you were to compare it to here, it would be as if there was one high school in the county instead of
Right,
70
right,
high
right,
schools in the county.
right.
So, that's the, the pull there.
Hmm.
So, but it certainly, it wasn't like we had a beautiful lake that I grew up
Hmm.
on, and I missed that. Every Fourth of July we go back, like I said, and have like family time
Hmm.
and everything. And when I say Fourth of July, I mean like the 10 days
Sure.
before
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
after,
It's
like
it's
a
a whole
like
experience.
like a week and a half of like
Yeah.
Fourth of July means like June 30th until like July 10th. So
Yeah. So you finished law school, which is roughly when? What time are you? What time are you
yeah,
in?
2008.
2008. Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you end up here? And like, what were you considering? What were the thoughts then?
Yeah, so that was another thing. I'm always like procrastinate when it comes to like making my big life choices. Like
Hmm.
so just like I was saying, it was getting to my junior year of college before I figured out what I was gonna do. It was really getting till my last year of law school before I was figuring out what to do.
Hmm.
And when I graduated in 2008 was when the economy was just
Hmm.
trashed, in the
Yep.
tubes. And Michigan had it, everyone had it bad, but Michigan had it as bad or worse than anybody because Detroit had the automotive industry collapse. And the thing with Detroit's economy
Mm.
is it's either automotive industry or tied to the automotive
Sure.
industry. And, the foreclosures were hitting like crazy.
Hmm.
It was sad. You had friends that you grew up with that parents were losing their jobs in the
Oh.
automotive industry and seeing foreclosure
Hmm.
signs and for sale signs everywhere. Detroit got hit really bad in that 2008, 2009 range to the point where a lot of the law firms out of Michigan, the big ones, just weren't hiring people
Mm.
at all. Like
Okay.
they were just doing hiring freezes because everyone was freaked out. I mean, it was
Yep.
right around when I'm graduating is when the Dow starts hitting like 6,000 or
Oh
7,000 or
yeah.
whatever it was. It was
Hmm.
during that crash, so it was really hard to get jobs. So going back to the big family I had, my mom
Hmm.
being one of five and my dad being one of nine, two of my mom's brothers were lawyers.
Okay.
So one of them in particular was a lawyer in Hackensack,
Hmm.
and he knew a lot of judges. And basically,
Oh, so they were all in New Jersey. That's
yeah,
right, because they're from New Jersey. Sorry. Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
yep. That's why I had this family out
Sure.
here. So it was never, honestly, it was never my plan to move back. I say move back. I never grew up here. I grew
Sure.
up in
Yeah.
Michigan, but it was never my plan. We
Return
did
to
come.
the family
We came
homestead.
out
Yeah.
here for every Christmas. So
Yeah.
as a kid, we came out here for every Christmas and for like a week. Like we always did big, road trips
Hmm.
out here for Christmas and stayed for that Christmas to New Year's.
Mm.
So it was my parents coming back home and me coming to visit my grandparents. And we would spend time in Pagoda and in Wyckoff. at Bogota and in Mawa and
Hmm.
in Wyckoff because one of my uncles ends up living in Wyckoff. So that's a
Okay.
story I'll get to in a
Yeah,
second.
yeah,
But
yeah.
what ended up happening is my uncle, who lives in Wyckoff, is a lawyer in Hackensack, and he knew a lot of judges. And the first year out of law school, what a lot of people do is clerk for a judge.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
it's actually really competitive, where you interview and like all the top Rutgers and Seton Hall students
Sure.
out here are trying to
Yeah.
get all these clerkships.
Which are both very good law schools as well, right? Kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And a Michigan kid wouldn't normally be trying to get a local New Jersey
Hmm.
clerkship, but it just so happened that anyone in my graduating class, they were either some were taking non-law
Mm.
jobs for a year,
Yep.
some weren't getting jobs, and everyone that was getting jobs, save a couple, were either going to Chicago or New York City
Sure.
or wherever they could,
Yeah. Yeah.
where whatever they could do. It was like a weird thing,
Hmm.
because the top Detroit law firms that would normally hire 200 kids were hiring like 10.
Yeah.
So the numbers were, it drove people nuts. People were going to Florida just because they had family down there, whatever
Mm.
they could do.
Hmm.
So my uncle was able to secure a couple interviews with some judges
Hmm.
that were looking for clerkships, and I got one of them. So I came out here, that was supposed to be for that clerkship,
Hmm.
and I ended up just really never coming back after that.
Okay.
So I did the year clerkship, and then after that, my uncle hired me at his law firm, and I worked there for a couple years, and then I ended up kind of overgrowing that spot, and it was more of a personal need of needing more money,
Hmm.
that I needed at the time to support the lifestyle
Sure.
that I needed
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
have, and wanting to have a family and everything else. So I ended up getting a job at one of the bigger law firms, and you
Okay.
probably see their billboards all over now: Garces, Grabler, LeBrock,
I
GGL.
think yeah.
So
Okay.
they have, since I left, now they have billboards
All
everywhere.
right.
GGL accident attorneys.
Nice.
But I worked from there from 2013 to 2017.
Okay.
Um,
And
uh,
and what just to go back to the clerkship,
yeah,
what for people who have never I'm not a lawyer, I didn't go to law school. What does it
yeah.
mean to be a clerk? Like what kind of judge are you working with, et cetera?
So the judge was Ken Slominski, great guy. He
Mm.
actually sadly passed away, too.
Mm.
But he was a great guy. He happened to be a family law judge. So I
Okay.
didn't come in seeking a family law clerkship. He happened to be the one of my uncle's friends that he was able to secure an interview with that hired me, and he happened to be sitting in family law during my
Mm.
clerkship. So he was a family law judge doing family law and divorces and any custody, any kind of family
Sure.
law stuff.
Yeah.
And what a clerk does is a judge has his own staff. So he has a secretary, he has a court clerk, he has a sheriff's officer assigned to him, and a couple clerical workers, and then a lawyer. 1 year out of law school, it's kind of a tradition that for 1 year a judge gets a law clerk.
Mm.
That has to be a law school graduate,
Right.
and
Okay.
it's usually the second part isn't mandatory, I don't think, but it's usually your first or second year out of law school. It's
Okay.
usually a young lawyer
Yeah. Yeah.
doing it, mostly right out of law school, and you basically help the judge by reading through all the motions, all the
Mm.
cases, giving him like briefs,
Okay.
being his like legal secretary.
Right. Right. Okay.
If he has 20 cases on the docket, your job is to give him cliff notes on them
Sure.
to make it a little easier for him,
Yeah.
so.
And what was your favorite and least favorite part about being a clerk?
He, you know, the favorite part was really getting along great with, I mean, it was like kind of jumping into the fire, but
Hmm.
like, it's funny. My favorite part was getting along great with the judge, with his secretary, and the real world connections of like getting real court experience, real
Mm.
courtroom of
Hmm.
like sitting next to him on the bench and just seeing real life court
Hmm.
that you wouldn't be able to have that access
Sure.
otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you
And
see every case all day, kind of thing.
yeah,
Whereas a lawyer, you might only see a couple cases a day, kind of
and
thing.
I really got along with him. I mean, he was really a great guy. I really had no complaints about him at all. So like Bergen County at the time I was going through my clerkship had say between 25 and 30 judges. So there was 25 or 30 law clerks because each judge had one that was in my like class
Hmm.
of law clerks. And you would try to, throughout the years and still, keep in touch with some of them. You keep in touch with them on
Hmm.
Fridays. Everyone would try to get out to go out to the
Oh,
bar,
nice.
whatever it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you would hear stories from half of them that hated their judges or complained about their judges, maybe
Mm.
not hated them, but
Sure.
like had all these, like
So whatever
complaints.
issue, kind of
I
thing.
didn't
Yeah.
have a single complaint about my
Oh,
judge. I'll
nice.
be honest with it. If there was, I would say it, but he was
Yeah.
just a great guy that I don't think I had anything. If I had any complaint, it was like I was worried if he was trusting me too much or
Oh,
like letting me enough of like, going through things of like, because he was too easygoing sometimes, but he
yeah.
was a great guy. Like I had no complaints of that. So I got very lucky with the experience that I had where
Mm,
not everybody had that same experience because I heard
mm.
horror stories from some people
I could believe it. Yeah.
about their judges. But mine was just a great guy. And so I had a great year. I mean, if I could repeat that year, it was a fun year of doing it. And I didn't really have any complaints. I guess the negative parts sometimes we're dealing with the public, but that was also the
Hmm.
positive part.
Sure. Yeah.
There were difficult litigants and difficult, specifically pro se litigants, which
Yeah.
means you
Hmm.
don't have an attorney
Yep.
representing
Yep.
yourself. And so there was a lot of, at the time, if I had any complaints, if you talked to me and did this interview in 2008, um, my complaint would probably be some of these crazy members of the public. But looking
Mm.
back on it, it prepared me well. Like I don't
Sure.
complain about that
Yeah.
now. Like
Yeah.
it prepared me well of learning that
Hmm.
from an early age,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
of my legal career.
I think it's a my parents got divorced. I went with my mom, and she actually went pro se in her
Yeah,
divorce at one point, which was kind of a whole other interesting story. But I heard a good quote like nobody's in court because they want to be there, right? Like they
yeah,
didn't choose to be there that day.
yeah.
Something happened to them, or they have to deal with another frustrating person. So
Yeah.
it
And
is.
I would be kind of like they don't get to call up and get the judge on the phone, but they could call up and get me on the phone. So
Oh,
like I was
interesting.
the
Okay.
access of like, of airing the grievances. So like it would be if I would be the ears and then I would filter to the judge what the judge needed to know or didn't need to know.
Hmm.
So it was like it was dealing with that at the time was the frustrating part about the job, but looking back it prepared me well. And it
Right.
wasn't
Right.
so
Okay.
frustrating as I matured
Yeah.
and got
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little older
Interesting. So, what surprised you the most? I guess coming into the clerkship. And is New Jersey law very different than Michigan law? And is that come into play or?
It's funny. It's funny you asked that because there are a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, and it does come into play. But I went to law school in Michigan State. I took the bar there, and I took the New Jersey bar. I passed them
Oh
obviously,
no. Okay.
but I never really practiced Michigan law. So it's funny now because every once in a while I'll get a phone call from somebody in Michigan saying, "Can you help me with this? Can I help you with that?" I'm like, I don't know Michigan law like at all. I know New Jersey law.
You're in a
But
database somewhere on the bar.
yeah, yeah. Don't trust me on that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'd have to look up Michigan law because
Mm,
I never really practiced there. I quickly moved here, and law school was okay for learning how to do certain things,
mm,
but I learned everything about the law between my clerkship and my first few years working
mm.
for my uncle, just getting out into the courtroom and learning all the local way to do things. So I would be like a fish out of water in Michigan. So I couldn't even. There's similarities and differences, but
Mm.
just the general format, I'd have to like look everything up, and
Sure. Sure. Sure.
where here I can do it in my sleep at this point. So there's differences, but I don't know enough of Michigan to detail it
Hmm.
too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And I think that's I guess I've lived in New York, I've lived in New Jersey,
yeah,
but then I've worked for companies that were in other states, and you talk to people that you work with, and it's not always evident unless you have been involved in multiple state legal matters, et cetera. So let's take adoptions, for example. One of my coworkers adopted, and he was saying some states are very pro the person who is doing the adoption, other states are more pro the birth parents, and like that is one
sure.
of like 57,000 different things that you could like rental
Yeah,
rights,
yeah, yeah,
alluvial and riparian rights
yeah.
from the earlier podcast episode. So yes, I always find that stuff kind of fascinating. So at the clerkship ends, what happens next?
Yeah, so after the clerkship ended, I was really at that point. I was still in my head wanting to go back to Michigan, but the economy hadn't improved enough. Like
Hmm.
there were starting to be whispers of jobs, but not
Hmm.
really. It was starting to be
This was
like,
like 2009. Yeah,
yeah.
I remember. Yeah, I was
If
even.
anything, it got worse before it
Yeah,
got better.
yeah, yeah.
So it was kind of like, well, my 1 year out here is going to be 2 years out here because my uncle offered me a job at his firm,
Hmm.
which I was kind of hoping he would because I was in
Nice.
trouble if I didn't have a job. So he offered me a job at his firm. It was kind of like a continuation of the clerkship, in the sense of like, his office is across the street from the courthouse. My clerkship ended. And I was more like his clerk now. So now I'm like
Hmm.
clerk for a lawyer. Like I am a lawyer,
Okay.
but I'm like I was quick for him to like shadowing him and going to court with him and
Mm.
learning it on the other side. And you know, I'm sure he gave the job as a favor in the sense of like I needed a job, so it
Hmm.
was kind of like a lowly paid intern at first,
Sure, sure, sure.
but he
Gotta
helped
earn
me
earn
out.
your way in, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But it ended up creating like, after I ended up leaving him, he ended up replacing me. So it ended up creating a position
Uh,
at his firm. It took, a few years to get to
yeah.
that. But I learned,
Two people to replace you? Two? No, no.
no, no,
Joe.
but um, but what happened is like that's where I learned being a lawyer was
Sure.
during that
Hmm.
3 years. I think it was 3 years that I ended up working for him,
Hmm.
from 2009 until 13. So from from like 2010 to 2013.
Mm.
So the clerkship went through most of 2009.
Okay.
So then from 2010 to 2013, I worked for him, and that's where I learned the confidence of really being a trial attorney and going to
Hmm.
court all the time. Like the way people ask about like what different law you do, and
Hmm.
I still do different general practice, but I litigate, I'm in court all the time,
Okay.
and that's what he does. So it's like, during that 3 years, it was invaluable of learning what it takes to go to court to put on a
Hmm.
case, whether it's a civil case or a municipal case or a criminal case.
Hmm.
He did a lot of criminal defense too. So I learned hands-on through that to where, the first year I was shadowing him mostly, and then by the second and third year, he was trusting me with giving me
Oh
files
wow.
and,
Okay.
and going to do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was able to I learned more of what it takes, of what you need to do on a day-to-day to be the lawyer during that time than I did in law school or anything else.
Mm. And what
So
did you did he litigate any particular type of law, or he just do
he
you specialize in
he
litigation? Or
focused
are you more general? How does
he
that work?
focused on criminal defense, municipal law, and personal injury.
Hmm. Okay.
I stayed away from the personal injury and did more of the criminal defense and municipal law.
Hmm.
Um,
And did you like it from the beginning? Were you kind of drawn to that, or how did?
yeah, 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 I was just being in court a lot and
Hmm.
trying to work things out and, um, you know, having trials and, that was awesome for me. Like I got to sit next to him being a second chair on a
Hmm.
trial, and that was more the excitement of law to me, of trials. I loved it.
Right,
So
right. It's funny. There's a great trivia point about my cousin Vinny, and part of why it's so accurate from like I think it's even used in law schools,
sure,
is either the director or the writer went to law school and was a lawyer and then became a
yeah,
director, and that's why like the procedures are all very accurate.
yeah, yeah, it is,
So
yeah.
what kind of not just I want to say personality, but like what attributes maybe is a better word to say it makes a good trial lawyer? Is it calm under pressure, being organized? How does it kind
You know, Definitely not being organized. I mean, it probably helps, but I'm not organized, so, and I'd like to think I'm okay.
yeah.
So, um, but just thinking on your feet,
Hmm.
you come in with a plan. You come in trying to be organized, and that's why lawyers need paralegals and secretaries
Hmm.
to help organize them, because I might have 30 exhibits and they're all on a binder 1 through 30, and I get there and I'm like, where's number 17? It's
Right,
all
right, right.
it's like a mess sometimes
Hmm.
pulling it all together. But just being able to pivot, think on your feet, adapt to something of like, when you're cross-examining somebody, sure you can write some questions ahead of time, but you can't just be up there reading from a paper. You got to just kind of
Mm.
ebb and flow and come up with things on the fly and pivot and really listen to something that was just said, because some of the most pivotal moments in a trial and some of the most impactful moments in a trial are things that just happened in the testimony of getting the truth out of somebody, or something coming out unexpected that you have to capitalize and jump on that you weren't prepared for before. So you just have to be listening and be able to think on your feet as it goes.
Mm.
So some of the most prepared attorneys coming into it, are almost too organized and don't do as
Oh, they're
well
like
as,
rigid. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, as attorneys that, if you have 300 questions written on a piece of paper, it's not going to go so well if you're just standing up there reading the questions. Whereas if you have general categories that you want to
Mm.
attack,
Hmm.
but be prepared, to, attack them as it's coming, and pivot from one to the other, and on the fly being able to pick up on certain things.
Hmm.
um, when I think about the last few trials I've had, the most impactful moments were ones that were not plans.
Mm.
They just kind of happened during the trial,
Oh,
and you have to
somebody
be
said
ready for
something
that.
you weren't expecting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it goes
interesting.
down a whole different road that you didn't, have. So, there's like if you have 7 or 8 different theories, it's never the one. I shouldn't say never, but it's usually not the ones that you think it's going to be
Mm.
that end up landing, and being more important.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to be able to, um, be creative and kind of be ready to unpeel the onion a little bit and see where
Yeah,
it
yeah,
goes,
yeah. It,
and
it.
not be afraid of that. Like the first few trials, you are a little nervous
Oh yeah,
of
you want to get
coming
hit
in.
with a out of left field kind of thing you weren't prepared for, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but being able to just come in there and be confident enough
Sure.
to to handle that. So
When you mentioned one of my family members is a paralegal, and it's interesting to see it from her side. And she has the story of there'd be a like the lawyer would walk in and be like, "What is my court case tomorrow?" And she'd be like, "This court case." Like, "Okay, give me all the files," and he would like kind of riffle through them.
yeah,
And it reminds me of like talk about being organized or more on your feet. There's a great story from World War II. Some of the best fighter pilots of World War II on the U.S. side had most people think fighter pilots have to have amazing vision. They had just okay vision. And like, well, how did you be such a great fighter pilot if you had just okay vision? And it's because they would pick a wingman with phenomenal vision. So the wingman would spot the enemies, and then the guy like, okay, here I go. I feel like a
that
good
makes sense,
paralegal
right? Yeah,
trial lawyer relationship is very similar. You need because they're not going to trial,
yeah,
so they don't need to be quick on their feet, so to
yeah.
speak. They need to be more organized, a
It's
detail.
very important, and that is a good. I like that analogy. I never
Mm,
thought of that, but that is a very good analogy.
mm. So, so you were at your uncle's law firm for 3 years, 3.5 years. What happened? What was
Yes,
the next
so
step?
right around. So I met my now wife I met her in 2011,
Mm,
2010, 2011, and then started dating pretty quickly after and got married in 2014.
mm,
So I got engaged in 2012. I ended up taking the job at Garcia Scrabble on LeBrock.
mm-hmm.
That's why I said you see their billboards
Sure.
everywhere now. I ended up taking that job in 2013, and it was really I needed to earn more money. I mean, it was a
Mm,
salary thing.
sure.
And I'm like, if I'm gonna have a family, that's where. And up until that point, I was still thinking about going back to Michigan. It wasn't until I
Mm-hmm.
met Ashley that I was gonna settle down here.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing with that is she grew up in Wyckoff, and my uncle that I was talking about that I work for lives in Wyckoff.
Mm,
So he grew up in Bogota, but he's lived in Wyckoff since the 90s. So it's funny because now fast forward a little bit that I have kids and everything, and I have three kids. Uh, I'm going to like back to school nights at a backyard on a street in Wyckoff where my uncle lives across the
uh,
street, where I was going to Christmas Eves
yeah,
at
yeah,
his
yeah.
house growing up. So I'm like, hey, I
Looks
went to
familiar.
Christmas Eves across the street. So it's funny how life comes full circle
Yeah.
without planning that at
Sure,
all.
sure, sure.
Um, but I ended up leaving. I remember like being nervous going to tell him like that I was going to leave him. It's one of those memories I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically, I needed more money
Sure. Yeah.
to raise a family
Mm-hmm.
on what he was able to pay me at the time. And he asked me what they were offering, like to see if he could
Yeah,
keep me
yeah,
and everything. He's like, no, I can't,
yeah.
I
Best
can't
that you
do
go.
that. Yeah. So I left in 2013 to
Mm-hmm.
take that job that I had, and I did start interviewing in that time because I needed more money.
Mm,
And it was I would have stayed there forever if money wasn't an issue, but
sure.
I needed more money, so I got that job, and I would have stayed there for a long time, but I ended up leaving that job in 2017. I stayed there happily from 2013 to
Mm-hmm.
20. I say happily. I worked my long hours and worked my
Sure.
ass
Yeah,
off,
yeah.
but I don't, I didn't have too many complaints about too many people.
Mm-hmm.
I had great experience working there too. I feel like I was trained from my uncle, so I knew what to do when I got
Mm-hmm.
there, and it was a good experience. I got along with one of my bosses
Nice. Yeah,
more than than others, but I left there on my own accord again because I needed more money. And what ended up, there was actually a funny story along those lines. They were good firm, but they were cutthroat,
yeah. Mm,
and basically, when you were advocating for yourself of the money, it could go one of a few different ways.
mm.
But it was basically like things changed while I was there over
Sure.
different
It
bonus structures
happens.
they're trying
A
to
lot
do
of
and everything.
companies grow, change things. Yeah, yeah.
But I was always a pretty good numbers guy, even though I'm a lawyer. Math was always one of my better subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And they unveiled a bonus program over there at the time, where it didn't take too much detective work to look at a spreadsheet and you could figure out what everyone else was making,
Mm.
because the bonus was a multiple. In order to hit the bonus structures, it involved hitting your salary first, kind of like hitting a
Right, right, right.
draw, and then
Sure.
percentages of extra
Mm-hmm.
income beyond different points. And I'm looking at it and I'm realizing another attorney who got hired there after me was making almost double what I was making.
Mm.
So I brought this to the attention of the partners, of like, why is this attorney
Such and
making
such.
more
Yeah.
money than I am? And they're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, "Look at your spreadsheet over here,
Yeah.
like it's not that
I'm a smart lawyer.
it's not that hard to reverse engineer." And they're like, yeah, you have a very good point, and
Mm.
that's so I'm thinking the next day, I'm thinking like they're gonna give me a raise. I'm gonna make
Mm-hmm.
like close to what
Sure.
she's
Yeah.
making. and then they end up getting rid of her, and then saying, and we're happy to keep you, and you
Oh
get to
wow.
keep your job,
Yeah.
and
That's a
you
little
know,
awkward.
and I'm like, wow, like this is cutthroat
Yeah.
stuff. Like I wasn't trying to get her out of a job. They're like, yeah, we realized, we're cutting costs, and
Mm.
you know, too much, fat over there,
Sure,
and
sure.
but we're happy to keep you,
Mm.
so you still have your job.
Oh wow.
But so it was one of those things where it's like it was such a cutthroat atmosphere after a
Mm-hmm.
while that that was like the trigger that I knew I wasn't going to be there forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I had my son, when my son was born, when Ashley and I had Callister, um, like the paternity leave was like a weekend. It was
Oh
like,
wow. Yeah.
he was born on the 29th, and we take him home from the hospital on Halloween, and like November 1st, they want me back at work,
Mm.
and it was no real consideration at the time of like I need a couple weeks off. And he did have, nothing serious, but he had a few medical issues at the
Sure, sure,
beginning
sure.
that required, some doctor's visits and maybe going back to the hospital a little at the beginning.
And they were less
And
than
I'm like,
flexible.
a couple weeks off. They're like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, that wasn't that wasn't happening. So
That's
that's
tough.
when I really just said I'm gonna start planning to work for myself and get out
Mm-hmm.
of here and set my own schedule. And I started realizing I could do it. I had the confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2013 when I went there, I didn't really have the confidence to start
Mm.
my own firm. And then, so I credit them,
Sure. Yeah.
that I got the confidence there to be able to do it. And I started realizing that I could bring in clients because I was bringing them clients.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I'm like, why am I bringing them clients on a salary when I can bring myself clients
Makes sense.
and provide it for the family? So it was a little risky at the beginning, but I gave them notice in 2017 that I was
Mm-hmm.
leaving. I opened up my own firm, and that's where I still am today.
Oh wow. Okay.
So,
As while you were talking about like getting paid, and I
yeah.
guess this also there's a follow-up question, I guess, when you start your own law firm. So my mom was a lawyer, my grandfather was a lawyer, some of my uh, like great aunts and uncles I think were a lawyer, and so I was talking to my mom relatively recently, a couple months ago, and I said, what was it like being a lawyer in Italy in like the 1915 kind of 1910 era? And she goes, your great uncle, he was a lawyer in town, uh, but it was a small village, so he was paid mostly in salami and Parmesan. I think so. I like this kind of alternate kind of payment methods that people have. So yeah, I think one of my one of the things I found most fascinating in talking to you and other lawyers is uh, at any given time, like if you have a regular W-2 job, you get a salary, money comes in on a very regular basis. Like if it doesn't come in, that's a big deal. As a lawyer, you are carrying a lot of float or debt, I guess, depending on what you want to call it, because cases are open, certain cases only get paid. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like it's
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I mean, it's kind of like anyone else working for themselves. Like the client, the type of law that I do is I do some contingency-based cases,
mm,
but very little. A lot of lawyers I do, a lot of the law work I do is just revolves around clients paying me. So like my clients are my salary. There is no
mm,
W-2, like you
right, okay.
said. By and large, there are some municipal gigs, I should say, that I got that we can discuss in a
Mm-hmm.
minute. But basically, most of my clients are I charge somebody a retainer and, 5,000, 7,000, 2,000, whatever it is, like that's my money. So if
Mm,
I don't get a new client that week or anything, then, that's,
sure.
like anyone else working for themselves, whatever price I set, my money comes from the clients. I do some contingency cases, which is probably more along lines
Mm-hmm.
of, your question, where you get a percentage of a settlement at the end of a case. I do some of that, but not a lot of that. A
Mm,
lot of that you see in personal injury work, and I do very little of that. But every once in a while, I may have an employment lawsuit or a civil lawsuit where I take a contingency where I get a percentage of a settlement amount,
mm.
and those are always, good cases when you get them. But that's not my bread and butter of what I do.
Got it. Okay. And then
So
what whenever I talk to people who are starting their own business or they're going much like your story. Your
yeah,
story is great, by the way, because I think it's always wonderful to hear how people progress through their career because
yeah,
a lot of times if you're younger, you're looking at folks that are farther ahead in their life. You're like, oh, how did they get there? And there's not always a clear roadmap, and sometimes the roadmaps are very random. So it's
yeah,
always great to kind of hear how people got there. So yeah, so I usually tell this story when people are going out in their own thing that, if you're sailing into a storm, where would you rather be? Like in the bottom of the ship, pulling on the oar, or would you rather be the captain? And so it could be very stressful to be
yeah.
your own business. Do you agree with that? Is it
Oh,
kind of different to be the owner versus sort of the employee? How do you?
it's very different. But I want to change it for a second.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, it, the thing that motivated me was again fighting that I'm going to raise a family. I want to have a
Hmm.
couple kids. I ended up having three
Sure.
kids. The part that motivated me was again the salary they were paying me wasn't I wasn't satisfied with that. So
Mm.
that's kind of been a theme throughout my life. I wasn't satisfied with the journalist
Hmm.
salary. I've learned from all these experiences, but I
Sure.
keep wanting more and more. I don't want like a salary cap. I want to be able to have
Hmm.
like unlimited potential. And what I was learning but I learned valuable things along the way at each step. But what I was learning when I was working with them is I was really making them about 5 times what they were paying me.
Mm.
So like
Oh wow.
why?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
and again, I'm not a complainer. So, I think I was there the right amount of time.
Hmm.
I don't think I was there too little or too long. I think it was a good part of my life
But
that
that
I
that
was
is a
there.
that is a big multiple. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that when I first got there. I realized that when after my short paternity
Sure.
leave with
Yeah.
my son and how cutthroat it was when I started running the numbers. I'm like, oh, I had the security of a paycheck and it was a nice one, but it was, you know, if my work is making them 5 times of what they're paying me, and to some extent there has to be some multiple because I had a secretary
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
reporting to me.
There's overhead
I
and
had some
fixed costs,
overhead
and
and
yeah.
all that too. So, I'm not cheap when it comes to that. But, I thought maybe 2 or 3 times would be something I could swallow. And I'm like, why am I working late nights to make them 5 times?
Mm.
Why don't I figure it out
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what built me the confidence to do it. And so it was salary driven at first, but it was also freedom driven of like, if I do want to be with my son for a week, I can do it now.
Right. Right. Right.
But at the flip side is I'm working 24/7. I'm on my
Hmm.
cell phone a lot. I had to shut it off just when we were doing this
I've
this
I've seen your
podcast.
text messages
So
roll in.
I try, to be accessible for my clients when they need me, and knowing that, that there's always emergencies,
Mm.
and so it's like, I've grown from when I started till now, and I do have some employees now that, paralegal that helps me,
Mm.
and a few different part-time paralegals, but it's, they want to talk to the lawyer. I have my cell
Sure.
phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, and you talk to anyone who's self-employed, whether, it doesn't have to be a lawyer, but anyone that works for themselves, you're always working.
Hmm.
So I even though one difference is when I was at the firm, I was late nights at the office. Now it's late nights at my home,
Right.
but it's still late nights of
Hmm.
working. But it's the flexibility
Sure.
of,
Yeah.
I don't have to be at my office in Hackensack till 10 at night, but I still have to be working or accessible,
Mm.
but it's more freedom while you're doing
Right.
it.
Right.
And it's for me.
Yeah.
It's
No.
not for somebody else.
Totally get it. I
You
think
know.
the other thing, more generally, and you can add more detail. Right. One of the things I found
Yeah.
fascinating in chatting with you is you'll say that like you think, oh, he's a town lawyer, he deals like everything is 9 to 5, but your clients will occasionally call you at like 3 in the morning
Oh
with like
yeah.
random questions
Yeah.
or emergency, which I think
And
I never realized. So
the
can you
three in
talk
the
about
morning is few and far
it? Sure.
between. It's happened,
Mm.
but I'd exaggerate if that was like a common based
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
But all the time, 10, 11 at night, 6, 7 in the morning.
Hmm.
Certain clients push it a little more than others, but they're nervous. I get it.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
they're not calling me for fun. They're
Sure.
calling me because there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I've learned to be empathetic about that. I might get frustrated behind the scenes,
Hmm.
but certainly, 9, 10 o'clock at night, very common that I'll be getting phone calls, and
Hmm.
even 11, 12 at night of, so usually around that, midnight to 5, people realize that they're not going to wake you up
Yeah.
unless it's life dependent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But other than that, it is very common.
Hmm.
And, so I don't know the best way to segue into it, but one thing that gets into there was a middle of the night time, which is fascinating stuff. But basically, I do have so my law firm is my job,
Hmm.
and my clients are my clients. But one of the things I did is a lot of municipal work. So
Mm.
I've had usually on a 1099 relationship, I've had
Sure.
clients
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are
We can go that way. Yeah.
municipalities. So throughout my time being in New Jersey, I've tried to get involved at the local government level where I've lived. So
Hmm.
when I first moved out here, I was living in Bogota because that's where my mom grew up,
Hmm.
and my grandma who passed away. And that was one of the reasons, not to be too all over the place, but one of the reasons I moved out here, besides my uncle setting up the clerkship,
Mm.
was to spend some time with my grandma because I was
Oh,
really
nice.
close with
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And I actually lived with her for a little bit when I first moved out
As
here.
as a young man in your 20s, hanging
Yeah,
out with grandma.
yeah,
Nice. Yeah.
and the funny part was she lived at an old she owned some real estate in Bogota,
Okay.
and I was able to help collect the rent and
Mm.
not really manage the property, but collect
Sure.
the
Just
rent, mow
help
the
her out.
grass, help
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
a little bit, and live there for a reduced rent. She still wanted rent, but it was reduced. And I ended up before that even
Hmm.
because there was a vacancy of a tenant moving out. Before that, I actually lived at the old folks' home with her. She had moved into a retirement home in Teaneck.
Was it
Uh,
hopping? Was there a lot going on?
it was funny because there was a particular story. I don't want to diverge too much, but there was a
Sure, yeah,
particular
we could take a
there
sidebar. That's right,
was
yeah.
a particular story where I had a little too much to drink after a card game of
Mm,
playing poker, and this was before Uber. It was probably in that 2009
okay,
range.
yeah.
And I was living with her at the old folks' home, like in a separate bedroom there
Hmm.
that she had, and I'm telling the cab, I had to call a cab. Like I said, Ubers didn't exist, and I'm telling the cab where to drop me off, and I had too much to drink, and I'm telling him the old folks home. He's like, I can't drop you off there. I'm like, that's where I live. So, um,
That's amazing.
so I was living there. But my point to segue out to all
Yeah,
that is where I lived was a little bit important to my timeline.
sure.
So where I lived during when I did the clerkship and worked for my uncle was in Bogota first with her,
Hmm.
and then at one of her houses after there was an opening there,
Hmm.
and then I ended up meeting Ashley, and we moved into an apartment in Saddlebrook,
Okay.
and then we bought our first house in Dumont,
Mm.
and then we were able to buy a house in Wyckoff, later
Sure.
on, because she went to the Wyckoff schools, and it
Hmm.
was always our goal to raise our kids where in the Wyckoff schools where she
It's a
grew
it's a
up, and
strong,
it's
that Wyckoff
great.
is a strong. We talked about in
Yeah,
episode
and
one. A lot of people
she
come
didn't
back
have to
like it's
convince
a
me
yeah.
too much when I did my research. I'm like, oh, it's great. The kids can go to where she went to school and all
Hmm.
that. So my point is that when I was in Bogota, I was there for when I first, moved to town
Hmm.
for the next 4 years, and I actually was still involved in political stuff. And my grandma was the chairman at the time of the local Republican Party.
Mm.
Not at the time, in the
Sure.
past,
Yeah, yeah.
years in the past, she was on the county committee and all
Hmm.
that back in the 80s. My uncle used to be very involved in the council there, and it just so happened to be one of my mom's best friends growing up was on the council and looking
Mm.
for somebody to run with.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, Jared's a young lawyer, he just moved to town, blah
Hmm.
blah blah, why don't you start going to some of these
Sure. Yeah.
Republican meetings? And so fast forward like a year later, they're like, we need somebody to run with her, and I ran for the council.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And not something I had planned to do moving out here, but quickly just kind of fell into place and happened.
Hmm.
And we lost, but it was close.
Hmm.
It was something like I had 900 votes and the winner had 1,000 votes. So it
Right.
was
Okay.
that kind of thing where I
Sure.
lost by like 100 votes, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
Could have been a totally different life path. You could have got.
I don't know about that,
Yeah.
but I learned things doing that, and then I end up moving to Dumont, and I run again in Dumont,
Hmm.
and this time it was more of like something I wanted to do,
Okay.
and it was more organized, more prepared, more of a plan. And while I'm doing that, back in Bogota, the people that I was running with at the time end up getting on the council and having control of the
Mm.
council.
Okay.
So they end up actually winning. I had moved out of town to Dumont, just buy my first house with Ashley,
Hmm.
and they actually appointed me prosecutor
Mm.
because when you have control of the local
Sure.
government,
Yeah.
there's positions that you have to
There.
appoint. It's
Yep.
like
Yep.
it's
Yep.
like a mini cabinet,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so they appointed me the prosecutor, and I became the town prosecutor for Bogota. And it was something where I that was like a smaller W-2 side job while
Hmm.
I was working my other jobs. And then after 4 years of being the prosecutor, they still were in charge. A judge has 3-year terms, and the judge's 3-year term was up, and he was a judge from the other party.
Mm.
And they said, "Would you be interested in becoming a judge?" I said, "I'd be honored to." So they actually appointed me to be the judge, and
Right.
so I
Okay.
ended up becoming the judge in Bogota and serving throughout that term. And then while this is going on, I'm living in Dumont now. I ran for council. We lost again. It was
Mm.
a close one,
Okay.
but I lost, and a lot more people live in Dumont than in Bogota. So now,
Okay.
now it's something where I had 3,000 votes, and the winner had like 3,400 votes or something.
Oh.
So it was a loss,
Yeah.
but it was a hard fought thing where I made
Hmm.
connections, and then right after that, somebody on the council passed away
Mm.
unexpectedly, pretty quick, and they needed to appoint somebody to finish his term, and they appointed me because I had just run in the election and
Mm.
had the next most votes when I lost,
Yeah.
and so I ended up getting on anyway, even though I lost, sadly because
Sure.
somebody
Yeah.
died.
Yeah.
So I ended up serving as a councilman in Dumont to finish that term off, and so I ended up, having a lot of different municipal work where I was the prosecutor in Bogota, I became
Hmm.
the judge in Bogota, I became a councilman in Dumont,
Okay.
and
That's a lot of
then
hats.
a lot going on. I'm skipping kind of some years
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
trying
Still.
to,
Yeah.
fill
I
in
get it.
the background to where these were, and then I end up moving to Wyckoff. Like I said, Ashley always we wanted to have the kids in school there,
Hmm.
and so before Callister was in kindergarten, it was kind of our goal to get here. And I start finally having enough money to make that happen,
Hmm.
to move to
Sure.
town and buy a
Yeah.
house, sell our house in Dumont, buy a house
Yeah.
here. And now I'm in Wyckoff, and now even though I lost in Dumont, now the people in Dumont are that I ran with in my
They're
connections
called,
now have
they're called,
control of Dumont because that's how
yeah.
local politics works. Sometimes
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
plant these seeds that grow.
Hmm.
So they ended up later on, more recently, after I was a council person living in Wyckoff, they hired me as a town attorney. So I became
Okay.
the borough attorney of Dumont,
Hmm.
which is a great, it's a client. I view them as a client, and it's like a
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
1099 type relationship of my firm. But it was a very good, client to
Yeah.
have, and being the town attorney is a lot of it's keeping you busy for
Yeah.
sure. It's a
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
client to have.
Yeah. No, that's
Um,
it's funny you mentioned the you sort of helped them out or you ran and you lost, but then they won. Like I
yeah,
mentioned that in the other episode about I tell that story all the time to people where you might do something and it doesn't work out and you're like, "Oh, it doesn't work out." You're kind of upset
yeah,
about it, but you never know down the
yeah.
road who remembers, "Oh, it didn't work out, but they were great," or
And my life has
like
been
a
a stream of that because that
yeah,
happened a few
yeah, yeah,
times.
yeah.
But what triggered? I wanted to get some of that in
Sure.
anyway before we run out of time. But what
Yeah.
triggered the memory of bringing that up there was when you were talking about the 3 a.m. stuff. The
Mm.
3 a.m. stuff happened when I was a judge. So I was a judge for 3 years, and I would have been a judge longer. But what happens is it's a 3-year term you get.
Sure.
And when my 3 years ran up, the Democrats had gotten
Sure.
control, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's just no matter how good or bad you do, if the other party gets in,
It's
they're going
very
to put their
party
people in.
aligned.
It's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's like the only way I can describe it is like putting your own cabinet in. They're not going to
Sure.
have people
No,
from
that
the other
makes sense.
party
Makes
in
sense.
there.
Yeah.
So the other party was in charge. My 3-year term came up. They put their people in, and I was expecting that to happen.
Hmm.
And so it was a great 3 years, but it went quickly. But during that time of being the judge, that's when, and that was the part that no one really prepared me for coming in.
Mm.
You went to this judge's training and whatever. But whenever the police arrested
You told
somebody,
me this. Yeah, yeah.
you have to call the judge to find probable cause. And, they can go put the handcuffs on somebody, but if you're going to send them to jail and find probable cause, they have to call the judge to sign off on it.
Mm.
So routinely, I got calls at 3 in the morning then, not
Right.
not
Okay.
from clients, but from the police.
Right.
Sometimes they had to come to my door in Wyckoff. The
Yeah.
neighbors were
I,
like,
I
"Why are the
remember
police
like
at
yeah.
Jared's house?"
I would see you the
you
next
know,
day like kids like the police were over my house yesterday. Yeah.
yeah. So sometimes I'd be like, if I'm a little groggy, it's because I was up all night last
Yeah.
night. So that was a fascinating part of I'm living in Wyckoff, but I'm the Pagoda judge,
Right. Right.
and so the Wyckoff police would know that, and even without getting into too many details, there was one scary part where a loony person showed up at our house, so the police had
Mm.
to come over there, and
Oh wow.
Wyckoff police were great. They handled it,
Hmm.
made the problem go away real quick. But it was one of those things where that's not the stuff you expect when you take that
Sure.
job.
Yeah.
And everything ended up, I don't want to over dramatize it. Everything ended up
No, but
fine.
still, I mean,
But
you,
you
you
don't
never know what
expect
can
that's
happen.
not
Yeah.
on the curriculum when you
Yeah.
sign up.
Page two,
Some
things
lunatic
to
shows
expect
up.
kind of thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's
But
so I think again we've had some conversations over the years.
yeah.
Can you talk like what are some interesting things that a town lawyer might deal with that like the average person might not even think of? I know sometimes like they'll film a show in a town, right? Like that's gonna be a thing.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah, we actually did. It's funny you
mm,
mentioned that too. Like the Gordon Ramsay was filming at a restaurant in town, so there was a lot
mm,
of red tape that they had to cut through,
right,
and
right, okay.
permits, and what they were legally and not legally able to do to shut streets down, or what's the process to
Hmm.
shut the streets down, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
getting the police chief involved, and how long are we going to shut the streets down, to do all that stuff. So that's not the day to day, but that's the stuff that happens,
Mm, sure.
throughout it.
Yeah, yeah.
The day to day is really you have these council meetings every couple weeks, and on the council meeting agendas, you have resolutions and ordinances and things to make the town run, and the lawyer has to write all that and be responsible for giving legal advice on what you can and
Hmm.
can't do. Because every once in a while you get a new council person, and that's why it was interesting where I was a council person and I was a
Sure.
lawyer for the
Yeah,
town, is you get new ideas and stuff, but not everything's legal, so you got to run everything by the lawyer,
yeah.
and you end
Mm,
up getting copied on all these emails of to protect everybody. It's a little bit of everything because you have some union relationships.
hmm.
The police have a
Oh yeah.
union,
Yeah, yeah.
the DPW have a union,
Hmm.
and they're constantly have contracts that are coming up every couple of years. Um, the only thing that was separate from me was the Board of Ed. I had nothing to do with. They have
Oh,
their own
interesting.
they have
Okay.
their own like governance and their own attorney.
Hmm.
But outside of that, the attorney, you were handling everything for the town. So it could be employment, labor type stuff, dealing with the unions and any issue that might happen
Hmm.
through employees at the town,
Right. Okay.
former employees suing the
Right. I
town,
was going to say just
um,
injury lawsuits on town
injury
property,
lawsuits.
right? Like that's
Yep, yep. And then also just the governance of what you can and can't do at public meetings.
mm,
There's a lot of, it only takes one or two people, but there's a lot of this First Amendment type activism
sure.
and activities
Yeah. Yeah.
of where people will come in at a public meeting and start putting cameras in your face and like, what are they
Mm,
allowed to do and not allowed to do? And
mm.
they will turn to the lawyer on handling that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and the mayor does a very good job of hitting the gavel, but the lawyer's the one kind of behind the scenes giving the advice
Sure. Sure. Okay.
on what to do or not to do
Yeah.
in a lot of those situations.
It's
So
I think another one thing that surprised me about the different incentives in a town. So many years ago, I used to run sports tournaments, and we went to basically there's nothing really similar in the area, but imagine if there was like a water park like right in the middle of Wyckoff, and they have a big kind of grassy area, and so it was outside of Chicago, and we have the event there, and we're there, and the mayor comes over, and he goes, I just want to say thank you so much. Every hotel is booked. Every restaurant owner's calling me to be like, oh, we're full every night of this week. This is amazing. The car place, like this is the best thing. That's like usually it's dead this time of year. Are you guys coming back next year? I really hope you're coming back. We're like, I don't know. We were having a great time too. And the owner of the water park just happens to walk by as we're having this conversation, and the mayor sort of turns to them and go, "Oh, hey, water park owner, I was just telling these guys how great it was that they're here. I really hope that you have them back next year because this was so great for the town." And the water park guy goes, "I mean, I don't know, man. They just paid me 10 grand. This is a lot of my headache. I don't know if we're gonna do this again." And the mayor looked like he was gonna explode. And like I'm gonna tone down the language. He's like,
yeah,
"You're a jerk. You don't care about this town at all. It's always," and it sort of opened my eyes to you might go to a town and think like, oh, everybody in the town is going to love this great thing. And even
yeah,
the person that you're sort of paying for the service, maybe sometimes they're mad at the town because the town's not great. Sometimes they're kind
yeah,
of a shyster as well. So there's
yeah.
a lot of dynamics that goes on. Have you seen similar stuff in some of the,
Oh
the town
yeah,
judges
I
club?
mean, there's so much political stuff that and different dynamics and
Mm,
personalities. And when I say political, it doesn't mean like Republicans versus
sure. Yeah.
Democrats. It's just a word that becomes infiltrated with like local politics. Just personality
Right,
conflicts,
right,
and
right.
he doesn't get along with him, or there's this person likes this, or like one person just I hate fireworks for whatever reason, so now there's no fireworks show.
Right, right, right.
Of like, um, like I
A lot of
despise
maybe
fireworks.
competing interests, I guess, is
Yeah,
what they'd
yeah,
say. Yeah.
yeah. So, and that's the part where it's always like relationships, and and I would tell people, having been on the other side of it, when somebody, I was always cognizant of, my pitch when I was being their lawyer was that I
Hmm.
was going to be honest and save the town money,
Hmm.
and not overbill, even
Sure.
if it might, be
More
my
long-term
self-interest. I
thinking.
thought I
Yeah.
could have more longevity on that job by being honest with my billing and being fair. And so one of the things I would tell council people that came to me, having been on the other end of it,
Mm,
is don't come to me unless you have three or four, unless you have a majority.
sure.
Depending on what it was, you needed three or
Oh,
four
interesting.
people.
Yeah. Okay.
Of like, don't come to me and have me write all this stuff if you don't have the majority support to do it,
Mm,
because now you're going to spend a tons of money,
right, right.
and we're all going to get yelled at, of why you're paying the lawyer all this
Yeah. It's
money
good advice.
to
Yeah.
do. And so a lot of it was relationship building and caucusing, and the in New Jersey they have a very transparent, open public meeting law
Hmm.
to where you're not supposed to have conversations of a majority of people behind
Mm,
the scenes, not at a public meeting. So you have to be very careful with that, to the point of you can't even send an email to everybody without,
interesting.
if too
Okay.
many people are copied on it,
Yeah.
because you can't have a majority meeting without it being publicly advertised. So you have to caucus in teamwork and talk one-on-one with people, and then build different majorities. And so I would always tell people to be careful. Make sure, when people would come to me with proposals that they wanted me to make a law and put it on the agenda, I'm like, you better make sure you have you think you have a majority of people, because this is going to be controversial. This is,
Yeah. Yeah.
people are going
Yeah.
to show up for this. It's going to be something
That's
where,
fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. It's
and sometimes I would just say this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
But if you really have you're the elected official, not me. I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to get into the policy too much.
Yeah, yeah,
But if the four of you really want to do this, I will write this up for you. But I'm telling you, it's a bad idea.
yeah.
You know.
With it,
So
it's funny you met because even I can't remember which of the big trading regulators it is, but they have a similar everything has to be in public to the point where no two members of the council can be in the same room privately at the same time.
yeah,
So if you and I are both on the council
yeah,
and we're about to get in the elevator and we would be the only two people in the elevator,
yeah.
one of us has to not go on the or you have to go in a separate elevator.
That's
And I
kind
was
of
like,
like this
yeah,
on steroids,
yeah,
but like the same concept,
yeah,
the same concept of it. But I made a lot of money doing that, and
mm,
that term sadly came to an end too.
mm,
It was on a term
sure,
just recently. I mean, I was doing that up until this January, so that just
okay,
came to an end.
right, right, okay.
But they were one of my, biggest clients. So
Mm.
hopefully there'll be another time. Hopefully I'll be doing it in
Yeah,
Wyckoff
yeah.
one day or
Interesting.
something. You never know.
The
Yeah.
circle of life kind of continues. Yeah,
Hopefully it continues
yeah,
because it has. Like I haven't had too many gaps where I
yeah.
don't have a municipal. Like I said, I was a council person, but I was a prosecutor, I was a
Sure,
judge and a
sure,
borough
sure.
attorney. Not a lot of attorneys have done all of those.
Yeah, yeah.
Certainly at my age too.
That's it. That's
So,
interesting.
you
And
know.
another thing I found fascinating, you were telling me how you can be a judge in multiple towns at the same time. Can you speak a little bit
So
about that?
if you're a municipal judge, you can be in multiple towns, and you can also have your law firm.
Hmm.
Once you're in private practice, once you're a superior court judge, which means county level, you can't have your law firm or do any other job. It's a full-time job, and it's a conflict of interest to do anything else.
Okay.
So if you're a county judge, it's a higher level. But if you're the
Hmm.
county judge, that's it. You can't
Right.
you can't
Interesting.
also work.
Okay.
When you're a town judge, you're also allowed to have your law firm.
And there
So,
are people that are judges in multiple towns
oh
at the
yeah,
same and also in a law firm, correct? Like
yes,
that. Oh,
yes,
interesting.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes,
Yeah, it reminds
yes.
me of I had a friend who worked in on Broadway, and they had the concept of so there's the star, and then there's a understudy, and understudies make a lot less than the star, but you can be an understudy for multiple roles. And so let's say I'm gonna maybe make up numbers a little bit here. It might pay 20 grand to be an understudy, but you could be the understudy in for
And,
six different characters, and so you're making over 100 grand to not actually be on Broadway, but you're kind of
yeah,
on Broadway. So I always find it fascinating these sort of like side gigs that people can
there
do at the
are
same
there
time.
are certainly some judges in both Berg and Passaic, the local areas, that make more money as a town judge for 5 or 6 towns than
Then
than
they're
a
level.
superior court higher judge would make.
Yes, yeah, that's
Um,
fascinating to me that that's the case.
for
Yeah,
sure, definitely. I know a few.
yeah,
I'm not going
yeah.
to name names, but I know a
That's fine.
few. Um, and people have always asked me of like, do I want to be a county judge
Hmm.
or a higher judge?
Sure.
And my answer to that is, I first of all, it would be an honor to be considered because you
Hmm.
have to be considered to do that. It's not just something you apply for. But really now the answer would be no because it wouldn't pay me enough money to
Sure.
support the family that I
Yeah, yeah.
need to do. It's kind of a salary cap,
Yep.
like
It's the
it's
whole
it
public-private kind of
yeah, and
trade-off.
it's a
Yeah.
it's a nice number, but it's not nice enough to support my family while I'm
Sure,
younger.
sure.
So it'd be something where if I'm older, it would be nice to retire into, but it
Hmm.
wouldn't be something that I would be comfortable doing now. And that's why you get a lot of older judges too, because I think a lot of people have
That
that
makes sense.
mentality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It'd be something to retire into, but not something to do when I'm younger, you
Cool.
know.
So I know you've also done immigration law. How did you become an immigration lawyer? What do you like about it?
Yeah, and that's actually become a big part of my practice now, and
Mm.
that's another thing that happened by accident. Um, so it was really not something I set out to say, I'm going to be an immigration
Sure.
lawyer.
Yeah,
But it was a very important part of my career pivot where in 2020 and COVID, just like anyone else with
yeah.
the
Mm.
world shutting down, the courts shut down. And, in March of 2020, when everyone else was experiencing this COVID, I start freaking out of, my going back to the beginning of our
Sure.
conversation, my
Yeah.
paycheck is my client's.
Yeah.
When the court shut down, people didn't, in my industry, maybe some of the tech people knew it, but in my industry, people didn't know what Zoom was yet.
Mm.
Once in a while, there would be a Skype call, but we
Right.
didn't, Zoom was like, what's that? So March, April, May, pretty much the courts were shut down
Mm.
in New Jersey. Somewhere around that May, June, Zoom became a thing and Zoom court started becoming up,
Mm.
but the courts were still
Have
closed.
you seen where the cat showed up on the court?
Yes, 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 yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
Um, and so what happened was, the clients, they're worried about their jobs and everything else, and the
Hmm.
last thing they want to be doing is paying a lawyer for a court that's closed. So
Sure.
everything
Froze,
just like the
basically.
court froze, the
Yeah.
payments to their lawyer
Oh,
froze.
wow. Yeah.
And so I started panicking a little bit. And the one exception to that, the one courts that were open, and this was during Trump's first term, were the
Mm.
immigration courts.
Mm.
They never shut down
Oh, wow.
throughout. Like they just never shut down.
Mm.
And so there were a lot of older immigration attorneys that were legitimately afraid of getting COVID that
Oh,
didn't want
yeah.
to go.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I got wind of that and trying to just be creative.
Hmm.
And I joined some message boards of like looking for things to
Sure.
do.
Yeah.
And there were some immigration attorneys that were paying per diem to go cover their cases because they were older and didn't want to
Oh, wow.
get
Okay.
COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I masked up, went out there, hit the streets, and picked up some clients. And was always very honest to report back to the attorney. Like I
Hmm.
wasn't trying to steal their
Sure.
clients from
Yeah.
them. I was very thankful for
Yeah.
the
Make
work,
everybody wins in
you
that
know.
scenario. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what happened in doing that is I learned the immigration process and the law and like just kind of getting thrown into the fire. You're nervous the first couple, but you start learning it.
Mm.
And so you learn it more, you learn it more, you learn it more. And next thing you know, I ended up having so many immigration cases. I opened an office in Plainfield, New Jersey,
Mm.
for immigration because that's where a lot of the client, like it
Okay.
was a high
That's the
immigrant area.
clientele is, yeah.
Yeah. And, I ended up making ton of growth in my firm,
Hmm.
opened a second office there. And if it wasn't for covering cases in COVID as a way to get through
Like bridge the
COVID,
gap. Yeah,
I would have never just said, I'm going to learn immigration law today. Like
yeah.
it happened out of
Yeah.
necessary. And it was only because that was the only court that was open. And it might sound crazy, like, oh, it was only March, April, May, June. That's 4 months of not
Yeah.
working. Of like, that's the difference of me like keeping my
It's
house
a
or
third.
not.
It's a third of
You
the
know,
year, basically, right? Yeah.
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 And for me, constantly relying on money coming in, it's more than that too, because like just when the court's open, it's not like it's not like a bunch of money comes falling from the sky that
Mm.
day. Like you got
Sure.
to build everything back
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people were out of their jobs. People had a hard time paying me for a little bit after that.
Yeah. Mm.
They had the PPP stuff, but it was hard
Sure.
when you're
Yep.
self-employed and I, no W-2 and all that.
Sure.
It was a
Sure.
little
Sure.
harder
Yeah.
gig,
Crazy time. Crazy
but
time for
I
everybody. Yeah.
got through it without any, without much of an impact. And the immigration now, I still have I'm in immigration court a lot now,
Mm.
and it's become a large percentage of my practice.
Oh,
Where
wow. Okay.
at COVID it was 0%. So,
Yeah.
you know, so
It's fun. I again, I love hearing these stories of things happen, people have to adapt. Like
yeah,
they felt like a door closed, but then another door open.
yeah.
I'm sure over the over coming episodes I'll talk more about people that, but that's one of my favorite topics to talk about. So speaking of, how did you become a Supreme part of the Supreme Court bar? Is that the right way to say
Yeah,
it? So,
yeah. So, in order to be, and immigration is funny too because it's one of the very few areas of law. There might be others, but the only one that I know of that I can confidently
hmm.
say where you don't need to be a member of every state's bar. There's a federal immigration bar
Oh,
that you can
interesting.
become a
Okay.
member of, and I can
Yeah.
appear in any state for immigration.
Okay.
So for the immigration courts, like I can be on Web, they use WebEx instead of Zoom,
Sure.
but I could be on WebEx and have been, very recently in
Hmm.
Texas, Louisiana,
Mm.
Mississippi,
Okay.
Georgia, where I can't go to state court there
Sure.
without having all those
Yeah.
bars, which is crazy. So, and every once in a while you get a judge that'll make you like say, no, it's not going to be on WebEx. Like I have a case in Chicago in July that I have to go to,
Oh, wow.
which I could hire, somebody
Sure.
locally to cover that, but my client wants me, and so it's
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
I got some brothers there, I'll
Yeah.
visit them.
Yeah.
But so what with the Supreme Court, you have to be in order to have a case at federal courts, you need to be a member of that federal court bar. So in order
Mm.
to have a New Jersey federal court, I have to be a member of the federal court bar. The next level of federal court is the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia. You have to be
Mm.
a member of their bar. And then the highest level bar after that is the bar of the United States Supreme Court. You have to be
Okay.
a member of their bar. So you couldn't just, take a case there without being a member of their bar.
Sure. Okay.
So there's an application process, and you basically pay a fee. You have to be in good standing. You have
Hmm.
to have somebody sponsor you. You go through that
Mm.
process. You can become a member of the bar, and to become a member of the bar, you get sworn in. So it's kind of a cool thing to try to be a member of the Supreme Court bar because you get to go there, and whenever there's like interesting cases going on, I'm because I'm a member of the bar, I have access. Like I could walk in. I have a ID. I can walk in,
Okay.
and it's like if there's a controversial case that you hear about, in the news on the Supreme Court when they're hearing arguments, it is first come, first serve. There might be 200 seats, and they might segregate like 50 of them for like some group that's coming to watch that day. But the other seats are like members of the bar. Like I could go there and watch. Like I have access to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so a lot of people become a member of the bar for whatever reason, but like I've always loved the politics. I've wanted to be a member of the bar, but I had a case that was at the Third Circuit, so I
Mm.
thought I had a legitimate purpose where I had a case one step below. I
Sure.
may end up arguing before the Supreme
Yeah,
Court,
yeah.
so like then I needed the bar.
Right.
I don't want to get there and then I'm like, oh, I'm not a member of the bar. I have to give it
Yeah,
to somebody else.
yeah.
So I was always trying to think one step ahead. I'm like, well, shit, I need to be a member of the Supreme
Right,
Court bar
right,
if I
right,
want to
right,
finish
right.
this case,
Yeah.
because my case was actually, one step below it, and it ended up settling before it got to the Supreme Court. So it
Mm.
didn't. I never ended up having that experience of arguing a case yet before the Supreme Court, but I'm legally credentialed to do so. So
Fascinating.
if
Yeah.
you ask me, one of my bucket list items, I want to argue a
To
case
speak.
before the Supreme Court. I haven't yet, but I'm allowed
You're
to,
hoping?
and I am hoping.
The way you're going, it sounds like you'll get there at
I'm
some point. Like,
absolutely hoping.
yeah.
I'm absolutely hoping, and I have some cases that could be candidates to get
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, it's like such a one in a million thing.
Yeah.
It's not like you take a case and saying we want to go to the Supreme Court.
Right, right, right.
It takes a lot
You got
of
to weave
crazy.
your way, even the
Yeah,
federal. I'm from watching documentaries, like there, like I think it's every level. There's different number of judges, and they
yeah,
have to
yeah.
agree to take the
And it
case, and
really has
there's.
to be a public interest type
Hmm.
thing, that affects other people. The Supreme Court's not interested in your local, neighbor dispute. It has to be something that has a public importance to it too.
Mm.
Hopefully, I didn't knock
No,
anything
no, I
over.
think you're good.
But um, but I had a case that was one step below, and I really can't get into too many of the details of it
Sure.
because it was a confidential
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thing that settled. I wish I could, but maybe on a future
No,
day.
no, no, that's fine. That's
But
fine.
but I had a case that was one step below, and that's what I had to get the bar in case it get
Mm.
there because it was legitimately scheduled to go there, and it ended up settling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
So
amazing. I think I actually sent this to you. I saw it one day online. The first woman to be admitted to the Supreme Court was like in 1887 or something like
yeah,
crazy
yeah,
number where it's like there's a very very forward-thinking organization
yeah,
at the time. So,
yeah,
to go back, if to the local politics part, I got exposed. You ran for like a local thing. I happened to come to sort of like the night where like the meet and greet night. If
yes.
people want to get involved in, well, whether it be Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever, what do you recommend to people to do? Like, do you write letters? Do you go to meetings? How would someone get started if they want to?
Go to the local, they call it county committee
Okay.
meetings. So like when I met you doing that, I would ran for school board locally
Hmm.
here, and it's nonpartisan. But as I said earlier on, without making it too political, I was on the Republican
Sure.
end of
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
And so I can't speak too much for the Democrats in town, but they
Mm.
have their own thing, and like every town would. But like the Republicans have meetings every month. And so it's just about showing up to one of them. They advertise on Facebook. If
Hmm.
you don't know where to go, just Google.
Or
You'll,
call the town or something.
call
They
the
can point
town.
you. Yeah.
They could help you out. But like the Republican Club is a meeting every Tuesday. Well, not every Tuesday, one Tuesday a month.
Sure.
But you still go to those meetings and introduce yourself. They love newcomers to
Right, right.
come.
Okay.
The beginning of every meeting is asking for if
Who's
there's anybody
new?
new.
Yeah, yeah,
So they're very friendly to, it's in their interest to grow and have new people. So
yeah.
everyone's
Hmm.
welcome. Don't feel shy about it. Being there, there's a rule for everybody,
Yeah,
even if it's sitting and listening for a little while.
yeah, yeah.
But there's a rule for everybody to help out, and it's a quick trajectory of making it what you want it to make it. As I learned,
Hmm.
quicker than I thought I
Right,
would.
right, right.
But it's for your role is what you want it to be.
Nice.
They're all
Okay.
friendly people. So it's just a matter of your level of involvement is the time you want to put into it.
Sure. And
So
well, they say the biggest impact individuals can have is at the local level, right? Just
yeah,
you go to a meeting, like my cousin has a great story where similar to what you were describing, somebody left the school board seat. He sort of stepped in and was like, did it. I guess I forget what the word is, like acting. He was like acting school board until they had the election. He did such a good job. He got elected to the school board, and then he loved the school so much he actually went back to school to become a teacher. And to your point about like the councilman and the prosecutor, sort of the lawyer, I guess it's very rare to take that arc through the system, and
yeah.
there are a lot of different paths you can take, and you might just get involved at a small level. It might grow into something bigger. So yeah, that's always cool to kind of. So we've also done scouting stuff together. You were an Eagle Scout. Tell me about your scouting experiences.
Yeah, so I was an Eagle Scout growing
Hmm.
up, and it was something I loved from my childhood and had a good experience doing. So it was kind of always I wouldn't say expectation, but like a dream of like, if my son was in Scouts to be involved again later on, because from when I became an Eagle Scout when I was 18 until when I had my son, I hadn't really been involved in scouting. It was kind of like it was a big, huge part of my life growing up and then a void.
Hmm.
So when my son grew up and wanted to be in Cub Scouts, I was like, of course, this is like a dream come true for
Sure,
me
yeah.
to be on the other end of it. So it's been fun being a den leader, getting involved with
Hmm.
that, doing the Pinewood Derby again, like
Yeah,
reliving
yeah.
my childhood of all that stuff. So it was just like getting to relive my childhood kind of thing.
Hmm.
So it was kind of cool,
Yeah.
and still is. He's in Weebles
You're
now,
still
still
doing it. Yeah,
still
yeah, yeah.
doing it. So
It's I remember so the first year we started it was the like again COVID had just ended and I
it was
think
chaos.
that we had like 18 kids and I remember
Yeah,
like we were like reading the book like what do we do kind of and then
yeah,
then it kind of thinned out a little bit and it was a little bit easier and I one of my distinct memories from the whole thing is uh a talking to the kids like they'll be like oh what do you guys like to do and some of the kids would say oh I like to play video games like do this and the one kid goes I like to plant things in the ground and watch them grow and I was like oh that's an amazing answer and then I think it was the one of the years I was on Reddit and I was looking up like things to do, and one of the posts was, "Oh, this year they get to do like knife stuff, which is both like a carrot and a stick." And I tell everybody that has little kids, sort of elementary school, do boys love tablets and video games? Yes. You know what they love more? Going outside with like knives and axes and like
yeah,
safely using them, but it feel
yeah.
like because nowadays kids don't get to do that as much, right?
Yeah.
So
And that's what they talk about. So like you can be on that tablet every day, but they're
yeah.
going to talk about that
Oh
moment
yeah,
they
that
had
day
with
we
the
got to
knife
use the knife
and
and
not
chop the
enough kids
wood.
get to get out and do that. So I love that about Cub Scouts and
Yeah.
and that's a very good point you brought up because I grew up outdoors and doing that stuff, but the kids these days aren't. And so it's a needed thing.
Mm,
The kids need that. So,
cool.
and they do enjoy it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. What did you have a favorite merit badge back when you were in Scouts?
I loved summer camp, and
Mm,
so like my favorite part of Boy Scouts, and I say the early part of Boy Scouts, like sixth, seventh, eighth grade, like the middle
mm-hmm,
school years, and into high school, but those middle school years, growing up in Michigan, we did a summer camp in Kentucky every year, Camp Crooked Creek in Kentucky,
mm-hmm.
and we would go for like it was a week at summer camp, but it turned into like a 10-day thing because we'd do some mines, some caving in
Oh
Indiana on the
yeah,
way
yeah,
down and things, and we had a great group. But like during that summer camp, like I just loved all the merit badges. I couldn't remember a particular one. I could try to think like wilderness survival was
yeah.
a fun
Okay.
one that was probably my favorite. We had the polar bear badge. I don't think it was an official merit badge, but it was like a
Mm,
polar bear like thing that we did.
okay.
Got a
Yeah,
patch even though it wasn't a merit badge. Love that. I mean,
yeah.
we were literally jumping into the whole polar bear thing in frozen water.
Right, right, right.
But we did a lot of camping that was pretty rough back
Mm,
then of like thinking about it now, but I loved every part of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And cold, like we did camping in the
I was
cold.
gonna
We
say
were,
you're up there. It's a lot colder than it can
yeah,
get here
yeah.
sometimes.
So
Yeah.
we did stuff that was like, I don't know if my son's probably too young for it still. And I was probably too young at the time, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Like it's a different world now.
Sure.
Um, but just the summer camp and all going to all the different Merit Badge classes at the summer camp, I
Hmm.
ate that stuff up. I loved it.
Yeah, that's
So,
great. It's my favorite. I actually never got the merit badge. And some things in I guess like in life, you do them, and you're like, I'll never get this. This is kind of complicated. And some things like, I just like made sense to me. Pioneering, like anything knots related.
sure,
I never
sure.
got pioneering merit badge, but there was a guy getting pioneering merit badge. He was like, Alex, can you double check my knots? I was like, yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's to your point, like I think it's great to go to summer camp or go camping because then when you come back like if you've never done that, you don't appreciate like a roof
Yeah,
and like air
yeah,
conditioning
yeah,
and modern plumbing, right? You're like,
yeah,
there was like a tube in the ground, that's all we had kind of thing. But
yeah,
you get to do canoeing, you get to do all kinds of different stuff. So it's yeah, it's an amazing experience and a great organization. And
yeah,
if people don't know, there's actually two different troops in Wyckoff for
yeah.
elementary school kids as well. So
Yep, yep,
and then there's also the daisies and the brownies. My wife's
yep,
involved with that as well. So
yep.
it's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, Sycamore and Coolidge have one,
Hmm.
and Washington and Lincoln have one. So they have it divided where the two elementary schools to
Hmm.
team up, and then the other two, so it doesn't get too big.
So
You
speaking of
know,
favorite part about living in Wyckoff.
you know, I said something at the beginning about Michigan being more friendly, but Wyckoff is a friendly town compared
Yeah,
to like a lot. It's very
sure.
good for the families.
Hmm.
Um, just very, very friendly, family friendly town. Um, Things to do for the kids, safe,
Hmm.
obviously. Um, just great neighbors, great environment. location is good,
Hmm.
and it's just like a good town. It reminds me of the town I grew up in as much as it can,
Hmm.
like we're not in the city, but
Sure.
like we're close enough to the city
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and to everything, and to other cities, so just safe. Like I have a big backyard. I have a comfortable area that we live in on a small
Hmm.
cul-de-sac. Our neighbors are great, I trust all of them.
Hmm.
So it's just a good family area. With not not too busy, but
Sure.
like just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the perfect area to want to raise my
Just enough
kids,
supermarkets.
which I am raising my kids right there. So,
No, that's
um,
cool.
you always have to worry about your kids no matter where they are
Sure.
and all the stuff that goes on at schools. But like I'm in an environment where I grew up in public schools, and I
Hmm.
wanted my kids to go to, I pay property taxes to have good public schools, and I
Hmm.
wanted my kids to go to a public schools I would feel safe in, and
Sure. Yeah.
save all that kind of money for college and not private schools unless it was absolutely necessary. Like when I was in, if my kids were in private school, it would be because I'd be in a town where I didn't trust the public schools, but I trust the public schools here.
Yeah.
Like it just seems like a good town,
Yeah.
So,
It's we said on the first episode, one of the thing part of how this podcast started is I would meet all these, you know, dads, moms, and you just get to talking to them, and people just have the most fascinating stories. So I was like, I just started a podcast, so I want to get to hear about it.
I
So
love it. I
yeah, yeah.
love it.
Well, cool.
That's right.
Jared, this was amazing. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Is there anybody that you would suggest should maybe be a future guest?
Yeah, you kind of caught me on the spot on
Yeah.
that one, but I could probably think of a few more,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
after we log off. But Bob Woods, who you might have met through
Oh
the
yeah.
Cub Scouts a
Yeah.
little
Okay.
bit, is always got some some great stories to
Hmm.
tell, I'm sure.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Okay.
he would be one that
Hmm.
that would come to mind.
Cool.
And I'm sure I
Some
could think
rustle
of
up some other stuff.
of a more when
Yeah.
when I start
None of the
thinking. But
the hot lights.
he's a local Lincoln dad,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm sure he's got some stories to
So
tell.
cool.
So
All right. Well, cool.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank you very much. This
thank
was
you,
great. You were a great guest. Thanks.
thank you, thank you.